And during the course of your investigation, do other officers of the Violent Crime Task Force have access to that file for purposes of continuing their investigation?
Yes, they do.
Okay. Is it uncommon at all for the, one officer, maybe an FBI agent, to be working on some aspect of the investigation while someone from the Michigan Department of Corrections is working on the other? Is that uncommon?
No.
Okay. In fact, did that occur in this case?
Yes.
Were there other agents and officers from the Violent Crime Task Force working in conjunction with you and Officer Dillon on this investigation?
Yes.
Now, during the course of this investigation, did this particular case, the Oak Drive shooting, was that investigated as well?
Yes.
And that started before you arrived, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You arrived sometime around March 16th of that year. The investigation was ongoing. Were you brought up to speed, Officer Burkott, on what types of efforts had already been underway by the members of the Violent Crime Task Force?
Yes.
And did you review the materials, the files, police reports, that sort of thing?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And would it be fair to say, sir, that that was a lot of material at that time?
Yes.
Okay. Eventually, you became the co-officer in charge with Officer Dillon, correct?
Yes.
And did you have responsibilities as it relates to this investigation?
I did.
What were your responsibilities?
Well, I was in charge of... Actually, Lori broke her foot, and she was off work for several weeks. And
You say Lori, do you mean Officer Dillon?
Officer Dillon.
Okay.
And so I was in charge of taking over the case and started typing search warrants and investigating each crime, and I was going back and looking at each incident and seeing what there was to do.
Okay. So after you joined the unit, the officer in charge is off for a period of time, and you're sort of thrown in the middle. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
But you had other people to work with, correct?
Yes.
And was it fair to say, sir, that other people in that task force were doing the investigation along with you?
Yes.
Okay. You received help from a number of individuals. Fair enough?
Yes.
Okay. Now, during the course of that investigation, sir, did the name of Kevin Smith come up?
Yes.
Okay. Would you explain to the jury how the name of Kevin Smith first came up during the course of that investigation?
We received information from Ms. Belskis that Kevin Smith had called her and he was inquiring if he had a warrant for his arrest because one of his sister's boyfriends, Jay, which is Jeremy Hayes, was arrested, and that the family was calling him, telling him that he needed to turn himself in.
So Ms. Belskis had a conversation with the defendant?
Yes.
And it was based on what the defendant believed might be happening?
Yes.
Okay. And what did Ms. Belskis tell you the defendant said when he contacted her?
That he was inquiring if he had a warrant for his arrest, and that if he needed to turn himself in, and that if Jay was saying anything, he was lying.
Did the defendant say that Jay was saying anything in particular about any type of crime, or just in general?
It was a robbery about a cell phone, I believe.
Okay. So he calls her and says, if Jay Moss is saying something about a robbery, he's lying?
Yes.
Okay. After she received that conversation from the defendant, was that information relayed to the Violent Crime Task Force?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And did that cause you some concerns as an experienced investigator?
Yes.
Okay. Why is that?
It's an admission, if you ask me.
Okay. And you took it that way?
Yes.
Okay. And based on that interpretation, what did you start doing then, Officer Burkott?
I started digging into reports and criminal history on Defendant Smith.
During your investigation, did you ever find out whether the defendant used an alias?
I did.
Okay. And what alias did the defendant use one time prior?
Timothy Russell.
Okay. He used the name Timothy Russell to a law enforcement officer?
Yes.
Okay. And did that then put Timothy Russell's name in this investigation?
It did.
Okay. After Timothy Russell's name got mentioned as part of this investigation, what happened next?
Well, I used law enforcement databases, and I pulled up the image of Timothy Russell and his physical description and noticed that it matched several of the descriptions of the perpetrators in the robberies.
Okay. So once Timothy Russell's name is identified, you dig around a little bit, you pull up the description of Timothy Russell, and it's similar to some that are involved in other robberies, right?
Yes, sir.
What happened next?
So then I query an address using databases that law enforcement have, and I find a relative of Timothy Russell named Denise A. Russell.
And if you know, how is Denise A. Russell related to Timothy Russell?
That's his sister.
And when you looked up Denise A. Russell, what did you find out?
Well, I pulled up a picture of her, an image, and I matched it to a surveillance video photo.
Okay.
And I confirmed that that was her in the video.
Just 1 second. Oh, they have that right here. Remember? Yeah. Just 1 second, Your Honor. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What's the number? Pardon? Close up. What number is it? Is it an exhibit? I'm going to show you People's Exhibit 126, sir. 146, I'm sorry. 146. Do you recognize that photograph?
I do.
And where do you recognize that photograph from, Officer Burkhoff?
It's a surveillance video from a gas station, and it's Denise Russell.
Was this some of the video that you obtained during the investigation of the ATMs?
Yes.
Tell me about the investigation of the ATMs, sir.
So, on the Hilldale robbery, the victim's credit cards were used at several different stores and a bank ATM on Woodward and 8 Mile, a store on Grand River near Southfield, and 2 gas stations near Finkel and Evergreen.
And was that a pattern that you had noticed in some other robberies that you were investigating?
Yes.
Did you find that pattern also with the Mansfield robbery?
Yes.
Did you find that pattern with another robbery?
Yes.
Okay. And so part of your investigation, would it be fair to say that you were looking at surveillance videos of areas around ATMs where victims' credit cards were used, correct?
Yes, sir.
You told us in the Hilldale robbery, one was used at a bank at Woodward and which mile? 8 Mile?
8 Mile.
That's PNC?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We've seen that video already. And you indicated that this is also part of the Hilldale robbery, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And I'm saying this, I mean People's Exhibit 146. And so when you're looking at that video, once Timothy Russell's name comes up, and Denise Russell's sister comes up, you see this photograph, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, was there also any connection to a car?
Yes, sir. So I queried Denise Russell's name and found out she had a vehicle registered to her.
And what was the name? What kind of vehicle was that, sir?
She had a 2007 Chevy Cobalt registered to her.
And we've seen some photographs of a car that was identified at, I think it was a gas station where an ATM was used in the Hilldale robbery. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to show you what's been admitted as People's Exhibit number. Pardon? Yeah. It's still exhibit. $147. Can you see the monitor, Officer Burkott?
Yes, sir.
Do you recognize what that is?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
It's a Chevy Cobalt.
Okay. And was this car in one of the videos of the store, I'm sorry, the gas station that was captured as a result of the Hilldale robbery?
Yes, sir.
And did this car match the description of the vehicle belonging to Denise A. Russell?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so you have a vehicle that matches the description of one that belongs to her, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then you have a photograph of what appears to be Denise A. Russell inside one of the gas stations at the time this car was there, right?
Yes, sir.
And was that also at the time that an ATM was being used from the Hilldale robbery from the Stewarts?
The times were consistent, yes, sir.
Okay. So you have her there with someone else using an ATM card, stolen
Yes.
ATM card.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to show you Exhibit 142. To 149. This is also on April 15th of 2015, correct?
Yes, sir.
And this is the same gas station that you previously testified that Denise A. Russell was identified being inside at the time the ATM was being used, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, was your attention drawn to anyone in particular on this Exhibit 149?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us why your attention was drawn to that?
Well, appears to be a male in this video wearing a hood, and he's trying to cover his face so he can't be seen by surveillance cameras.
Now, does that hoodie look familiar to you based on what you observed from earlier that evening involving the ATM?
Yes, sir.
Tell me about that.
Well, the dark clothing was described in the West Hilldale robbery.
What about the jacket itself? Does it look familiar to another video?
Yes, sir.
Tell me about that.
So, at the PNC Bank ATM, the camera captures defendant Smith using the victim's credit card or debit cards, and he's wearing a black hoodie with a Nike logo on the chest.
Can we bring up 136, please? Can you see 136 on the monitor, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is this the video that you're describing that was taken for the PNC Bank?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I'm pointing on 136 to the monitor here. Is this the Nike logo that you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's go back to the other exhibit, please. Can you zoom in on... does this appear, based on your experience, to be similar to the Nike jacket that the suspect is wearing at the PNC Bank?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Now, at that time, you indicated you didn't know who was wearing that who was wearing that hoodie in either photographs, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. So you've got Denise car, Denise Russell's car there. You've got Denise Russell there, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what did you do next?
I asked Officer Dillon to go by 12713 St. Mary's, which is the home of both Timothy Russell and Denise A. Russell.
And that's in the city of Detroit?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And if you know, did Officer Dillon do that?
She did.
Okay. And why did you ask Officer Dillon to go by that house on St. Mary Street?
We wanted to confirm that Denise A.'s car was blue, had tinted windows, and a sunroof, just to make sure that that was in fact the car in the video.
And did you receive information back from Officer Dillon?
I did.
Okay. And based on what you received back from Officer Dillon, what did you do?
She told me that it was a match. The car had all the characteristics of the car in the video.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Handing you what's been received, stipulation from yesterday, St. Mary's. Handing you People's Exhibit 524, sir, which is a stipulation from yesterday with Sergeant Ferris about the execution of the search warrant at 12713 St. Mary Street in the city of Detroit. I'm going to draw your attention to page 3 of that exhibit, sir.
Yes, sir.
Do you recognize what that is, sir?
Yes, sir.
What is that?
This is the 2007 Chevy Cobalt that's registered to Denise A. Russell.
So when you received information from Officer Dillon that the suspect car, Denise A. Russell's car, which is in the video from the gas station, is at the house on St. Mary Street, it confirmed in your suspicion what?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
When you received information from Officer Dillon that the car was there, it confirmed your suspicion that the car was involved in these robberies, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What did you do next?
Start typing search warrants for the 12713 St. Mary's address.
And folks, this is 302, Mr. Williams.
Thank you.
I'm going to hand you what's marked as People's Proposed Exhibit 302. Do you recognize what that is?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
It's Denise A. Russell's 2007 Chevy Cobalt.
Is it a fair and accurate depiction of how the car looked?
Yes, sir.
Move to omit 302, Your Honor.
Any objection? No, Your Honor. It'll be received.
So you indicated that you started to type a search warrant for St. Mary's address where Denise A. Russell shared a home with Timothy Russell, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, in addition to the information that you received about Denise A. Russell, we were also investigating her brother Timothy Russell as it relates to his involvement in this activity.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you tell me about that?
Tim matched the description in several of the robberies. So we started pulling looking for Facebook accounts and social media accounts associated to him.
Was there an ATM, a credit card used in an ATM from a robbery that had someone in distinctive clothing?
Yes, sir.
And do you recall which one that was?
That was the 14600 Foss robbery.
Okay. And that occurred sometime in May, is that correct?
Yes, sir, May 11th.
Okay. And that involved Mr. Reeser, that we've heard him testify, and you were here when he testified, correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you describe what you mean by distinctive clothing?
In the video that the victim's debit cards were used, the perpetrator had on an American flag shirt.
A rather distinctive looking shirt, correct?
Very distinctive.
Did that stand out to you as an officer investigating this case?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Based on that information, can we, I'm sorry, we have 185. Can you show me 185, please?
185.
185. Is this, for the record, I'm displaying Exhibit 185 and pointing to the person walking in a door wearing a hoodie, a baseball cap, shorts, and Timberland boots. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And would you describe for the jury, is this the individual that you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
And what's distinctive about his clothing?
The American flag shirt.
A little unusual from your perspective.
Yes, sir.
Now, based on that observation, did you do anything?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
What did you do?
We began looking for the social media accounts for Timothy Russell.
Social media accounts like Facebook, that sort of thing?
Yes, sir.
Is that a tool that's commonly used in law enforcement?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And have you ever had success using social media accounts to identify suspects in the past?
Yes, sir.
Take that down, please. Take it down, please. So, as part of the Violent Crime Task Force, you started investigating social media for Timothy Russell, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you come to find out that Timothy Russell had a Facebook account?
Yes.
And was that examined?
Yes.
And did it provide any physical documentation, any photographic documentation of Timothy Russell, how he appeared?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and did that cause you some concern?
Yes, sir.
Why?
There was a picture of Timothy Russell on his page sitting in a car wearing the American flag shirt.
May I approach the witness, Ron?
Yes.
Any what's been proposed as People's Proposed Exhibit 529. You recognize what that is, sir?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
It's Timothy Russell wearing the American flag shirt sitting in a car.
Is that a screenshot of his Facebook account?
It is.
And is that a screenshot of his Facebook account that was taken by the Violent Crime Task Force during your investigation of his involvement in these robberies?
Yes, sir.
And is it distinctive to you, that photograph?
Yes, sir.
Why?
Well, it's confirmed that that would be Timothy Russell from comparing it to a driver's license photo and the American flag shirt. The account name is HP Playmaker Russell.
Is it that a fair and accurate depiction of the screenshot that was taken of that picture on Timothy Russell's Facebook account?
Yes, sir.
Move to amend proposed 529, Your Honor.
Without objection. Will be received.
9 minutes split. Is this the photograph we're talking about, sir?
Yes, sir.
And this individual, you said, appears to be the individual of Timothy Russell, correct?
Yes, sir.
You indicated that you confirmed the photographic identification of him by using what?
A driver's license image.
Okay. So you had a driver's license image that looked similar to this picture?
Yes, sir.
And you indicated the last name on this Facebook account is Russell, Playmaker Russell, or something to that effect?
Yes. Yes, sir.
And this appears to be Timothy Russell wearing a shirt that's similar to the shirt that we just saw on the video from the ATM stores, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Was that part of establishing the connection between Timothy Russell, Benicia Russell, and these armed robberies?
Yes, sir.
Now, you told us before that Kevin Smith had called in and said, "Don't believe J. Moss," and you also had information that he was also somehow associated with Timothy Russell. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You found out that one time he gave his name as Timothy Russell to law enforcement, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was that part of your investigation as well?
Yes.
So in addition to getting a search warrant for St. Mary's address, did you get a search based on Benicia and Timothy Russell? Did you get search warrants for other locations as well?
We did.
What other locations did you get search warrants for?
For Kevin Smith's house, 174 West Hilldale. For Robert Williams, aka Nunu's apartment.
And how was it you were able to identify Kevin Smith's house?
He gave that address to Miss Belskis as where he was staying.
Okay. And based on his association with Timothy Russell, did you get a search warrant for that house?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Other than his association with Mr. Russell, what are the bases that you have for the search warrant for his house?
That he was in the video for at 8 Mile in Woodward at the PNC Bank.
Okay, that's what I was getting to. The PNC Bank on April 15th, 2015, the video from the ATM, the person wearing the Nike, were you able to make the identification of that person?
Yes.
How did you do that?
I was sitting around with members of the task force, and they pulled up certain images, mug shots of Kevin Smith, and there was a certain mug shot where you could see the market that he has by his eye, and then you could also see that in the video.
Okay.
And then
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
there was also pictures on his Facebook account wearing the Nike hoodie.
$135? No, the phone. For the Nike there. Yes. Pardon? It's not busy. From the cell phone, right? Okay. What's that number? I'm going to show you a photograph as soon as I find it.
Okay.
We'll come back to that. Let's move on. You indicated that you were able to identify the defendant, Mr. Smith, on some on some Facebook account?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So based on your Facebook analysis, based on the pictures that you had, the photographs that you had of Mr. Smith and the PNC, and his association with Mr. Russell, was that part of the basis you had for probable cause to search his house on Hilldale Street?
Yes, sir.
So in addition to a search warrant that is executed on St. Mary Street, were you part of the search warrant execution for the defendant's home on Hilldale Street?
I was.
And again, just so I'm clear, that was the address that he gave to previously identified as his home on Hilldale, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. At this time, I would move to admit by stipulation People's Hilldale. People's proposed exhibit number 525 by stipulation, which is relates to the execution of the search warrant at 174 Hilldale Street in the city of Detroit. Is that correct stipulation, counsel?
It is.
In addition to that, Your Honor, I have prepared copies for the jury as well as for the court.
All right.
I move to admit 525.
It will be received.
Stipulation reads that the parties in this case here agreed to the facts stated below. On June 15th, 2015, officers executed a search warrant at 174 Hilldale Street and took the following photographs and found the following items at the location. And then there, 525 includes a number of photographs of items that were confiscated during the execution of the search warrant. The stipulation is signed by me and both myself and Mr. McWilliams.
That's right. Assuming that they were going to show them and display. All right, hang on for just a minute while
Sure.
we're passing that, okay? Everybody got one? All right. Go ahead, Mr. Moran.
Thank you. Now you indicated, sir, that you went to an address which the defendant identified as his home at 174 Hilldale Street. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And is that pursuant to a duly authorized search warrant authorized by a court?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And tell us what you did, how you prepared, and how you got there.
So part of the team went in advance and set up surveillance at the house. Observed Mr. Smith coming and going from the house, in and out the front door, and then eventually the execution of the search warrant was done by part of our other team.
How many officers were involved in that search warrant execution?
I don't know exactly. Probably around 12 to 15.
While that execution was going on at 174 Hilldale, were other search warrants being executed at the same time?
No.
Okay. This one was executed by itself.
Yes, sir.
Were you part of the search warrant execution team?
I was not.
Okay. Did you go to the address at 174 Hilldale?
Yes, sir.
And when did you arrive at that location?
I arrived after the house was secured and Mr. Smith was in custody.
Okay. So the search warrant is executed, and then you arrived, correct?
Yes, sir.
At the time you arrived, was the defendant in custody?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what did you do when you got there?
I walked over to the scout car that he was in. I opened the rear door to talk to him.
And he's in custody, correct?
Yes, sir.
Without telling us the content of the conversation, did you have a conversation with him?
Yes, sir.
After you talked to him, what did you do then?
Well, I just asked him his name when I was there.
Okay. Did he identify himself?
As Timothy Russell.
So he didn't tell you his name is Kevin Smith.
He told me it was Timothy Russell.
Do you see Kevin Smith in court today?
I do.
Where is he?
He's seated at the defense table wearing a blue shirt and black tie, black pants.
May the record reflect the witnesses identified the defendant, Kevin Smith.
As well.
Is this the person that was seated in the car on 174 Hilldale Street after the search warrant was executed?
Yes, sir.
And is this the person that told you his name was Timothy Russell?
Yes, sir.
Okay. After he told you his name was Timothy Russell, what did you do?
Well, I kind of laughed
Why'd you laugh?
because we had another surveillance team follow Timothy Russell and Robert Williams over to an address on West Outer Drive.
So while he's telling you his name is Timothy Russell, you know that Timothy Russell and Robert Williams are under surveillance.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you already knew who Timothy Russell was and Robert Williams was, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. After you laughed, what happened?
We prepared the house for looking for the evidence.
And was anything taken from inside the defendant's house on 174 Hilldale Street?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What items were taken, sir?
There was clothing, handguns, cell phones, a hat, several items.
Okay. Let's start with page 1 of 525. Can you see the monitor there, sir?
Yes, sir.
Do you recognize the photograph of this address that says 174?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And does this appear to be the house where the search warrant was executed?
It is.
You indicated that a number of items were taken from the house: clothing, cell phones. Were any firearms recovered?
Yes, sir.
How many firearms were recovered from inside the defendant's house?
2.
Okay. And what type of firearms were they?
One was a Glock 40 caliber.
Let's talk about that Glock 40 caliber first, if I could, please. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Handing you People's Exhibit number 41 for the records for cleared. I'd ask you to take a look at that. Do you want gloves?
And that's okay.
I think it's right here. recognize People's 41?
Yes, sir.
And where do you recognize it from, sir?
This is the Glock 40 caliber that I recovered from inside of 174 West Hilldale.
And can you tell us where that Glock was recovered from?
It was in the dining room. There was a cabinet, and on top of the cabinet, it was sitting up there.
And does the gun appear as it appeared when you recovered it?
No, sir.
How is it different?
It had a laser attached to the front here. It had a magazine. It was fully loaded. It had a round in the chamber.
What does it mean to have a round in the chamber?
The gun's loaded.
Loaded. Is that cocked too?
Well, this gun doesn't cock, but loaded, it would be ready to fire.
And you indicated that there was a laser pointer. What is that? What's the purpose of that?
It's basically like a sight where the laser is pointing is the barrel direction that the gun is going to fire.
So just very similar to the laser pointer that I use to point to items on the screen. For example, 174 Hilldale, People's Exhibit 525. Does the laser also point as well?
Yes.
Just like I'm doing now, correct?
Yes, sir.
Was that laser affixed to the gun when you recovered it from the address at 174 Hilldale Street?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that was placed onto evidence?
Yes, sir.
You put it back in the envelope. Was that the only firearm recovered from the defendant's home?
No, sir.
Was there another firearm recovered?
There was.
Can you tell us what kind of firearm that was?
I believe it was a 9mm high point.
And where was the 9mm high point firearm recovered from the defendant's home at 174 Hilldale Street?
It was in an upstairs bedroom, and it was in some sort of almost like a purse or case or something like that. Not like a purse, but some sort of zip-up pouch.
Handing you People's Exhibit number 142. Officer Burkott, do you recognize what that is?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
This is a high point semi-automatic 9mm firearm.
And do you recognize that high point 9mm semi-automatic firearm?
I do.
Where do you recognize it from?
This is the gun I recovered from the upstairs bedroom at 174 West Hilldale.
And is it in the same condition today as it was when you recovered it?
No.
How is it different?
It's been safe. Now it's safe. It's got the zip tied through the barrel so it can't be fired, but this gun was also loaded.
It had a magazine in it?
Yes, sir.
And it was loaded?
Yes, sir.
That's the one that you found in the pouch, correct?
Yes, sir.
You can put that back. Officer Burkott, was any ammunition recovered from the search of the defendant's home?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us about that, please?
So the first thing I saw when I went in the living room was a bag on top of that cabinet. And I grabbed the bag and I pulled it down on the table, and when I opened the bag, there was a box of, I think it was 380 ammunition.
Can we see page 2 of 525, please? Officer Burkott, can you see page 2 of 525 from where you are?
Yes, sir.
And can you tell us these two photographs, what they depict?
So the top one is the bag that I saw sticking up from the cabinet, and then you can see the box. And the bottom one is the box without the bag. There's live ammunition in there.
So this is the ammunition that you found inside the bag?
Yes, sir.
And you indicated what type of ammunition was that?
I believe it was 380.
So 380 does that work with the 40 caliber or the 9mm handgun?
No, sir.
So it's for a different type of gun?
Yes, sir.
And this was found where again?
It was on the same cabinet that the Glock handgun was on.
And that cabinet was in the front room, you said, or the dining room?
The dining room.
Can we see page 3? I'm sorry, page 4. I misspoke. The next page 4. Next page. bigger. Can I see the bottom photograph, please? For the record, I'm displaying the second to last page, bottom portion of People's Exhibit 525. Officer Burkott, do you recognize this photograph?
Yes, sir.
And how do you recognize that?
That would be the dining room from 174 West Hilldale.
Is this on the first floor of that residence?
Yes, sir.
As you walk into the house, this would be on the first level?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And this is the front room, for lack of a better term, fair to say?
Yes, sir.
And would this room beyond the arch in People's 525, would that be the dining room area that you described for us?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now I noticed that if you look at that photo, it's a little grainy, but can you tell us what these items are on the left-hand side of the wall in the dining room?
They're trophies.
Trophies?
Trophies.
Like sports trophies?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but yeah, like sports trophies. I don't remember exactly what they were for, but...
And is this, the area where these trophies are, is this a table or a desk or something?
It's a table.
Table. And is this the room where you found that 45 caliber Smith & Wesson Glock handgun?
It was a 40 caliber, and yes, it would be a little to the right.
To the right of this exhibit?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, the 40 caliber, I want to be clear.
Yes, 40 caliber.
Now can we see the previous page? The top photograph on this page of People's 525, is this the pouch where the high point 9mm was recovered?
Yes, sir.
And this, you told us, was upstairs in the bedroom?
Yes, sir.
And it was fully loaded in the pouch, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. You indicated to us that there, in addition to the two guns and ammunition, was there anything else recovered from the house?
Yes, sir.
What else was recovered?
Some clothing.
Can you describe the clothing for us?
There's a black zip-up Nike jacket with a hood. There's also a like gray knit hat.
Anything else?
Some dark colored clothes. I think they were like sweatpants or something like that. I'm not exactly sure.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked as People's Proposed Exhibits 44, 45, and 46. These are all the contents of the bag. If you would just take a look at that. First of all, do you recognize where that clothing came from?
Yes, sir.
And did that come from was that collected during the search warrant execution at 174 Hilldale Street in the city of Detroit?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You took something out of that bag, and I think that's People's Proposed Exhibit number 40. What's that tag? 45. Do you recognize what that is, sir?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
This is the black zip-up Nike hooded jacket.
Was that recovered from the search warrant execution of the defendant's home?
Yes, sir.
Move to admit 45, Your Honor.
Without objection. 45 or 43?
Which one number is that?
43.
43, Your Honor. That's the Nike hoodie?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that was taken from the defendant's home. Where was that recovered?
This would have been in a closet. Right when you walked in the house, there was a closet to the immediate right, and this was in a bag of clothes.
You put that back in.
Okay.
Take out the next item.
Right. Any objections?
No, Your Honor. No.
43 will be received.
Thank you.
These are... What?
44.
People's Proposed Exhibit 46. What is that, sir?
These are khaki shorts.
And were those recovered from the search of the defendant's home?
Yes.
Move to admit 46, Your Honor.
Any
Without
objection?
objection. No.
That we received?
Lastly, there's two more items, right?
Yes. Yes.
This
So-
is People's Proposed 45. What is this?
These are black sweatpants.
Move to admit 45, Your Honor. Was that recovered from the defendant's home?
Yes.
Likewise, Your Honor.
It'll be received.
Inside. What are those?
Black jeans.
That's proposed 44.
What's 44? Were those recovered from the search of the defendant's house?
Yes, sir.
Move to admit Proposed 44.
Likewise.
44 will be received as well.
Now, lastly, there's an individual envelope. I got it. People's Proposed Exhibit number 46. Take a look at that, sir. You recognize what that is?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
It's a gray knit hat.
And do you recognize that graded hat?
I do.
Where do you recognize that from?
This hat was recovered from 174 West Hilldale.
Now, this is People's Proposed Exhibit number 5-6. 5-6. I would move to omit Proposed Exhibit number 5-6.
Any objection to 56 being received into evidence?
No, Your Honor.
56 would be received.
I'll take that now. While we're talking about Lieutenant Kevin Smith, sir, sometime recently, were you contacted by an individual by the name of Brandy?
Yes, sir.
And is Brandy a girlfriend of someone?
Yeah, she's the girlfriend of Robert Williams.
And did Brandy contact you for a reason that she was concerned about?
Yes.
And can you relay that reason to the jury, please?
I've received a message from Brandy stating that Kevin had called her and that she was arguing with John.
And who is John?
John is Robert Williams' cousin.
And based on that information, did you see that Corporal Sobel from the Wayne County Jail was contacted?
I did.
And was the phone number that Brandy gave to you as her contact information, was that provided to Sergeant Corporal
Yes.
Sobel? And based on that, were calls to that number from the Wayne County Jail monitored?
Yes.
And they were pulled and they were provided to you as well as to members of the Wayne County Proctor's Office, correct?
Yes, sir.
And did you review that particular call?
I did.
And we're talking about exhibit number 77, just for the record. And at that time, it's 100%. Did you think you recognized the voice of that person on the call?
Yes.
And whose voice did you think you recognized?
I think it's Kevin Smith's.
Okay. All right. And that's the call that we heard yesterday from Corporal Sobel, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You listened to other calls from the defendant as well?
Yes.
Your Honor, I think that we have a stipulation on 2 calls that are outside. There's the
Okay.
Okay. I'm just looking for the stipulation. I had it a minute ago. Well, just parts of it. We have a proposed stipulation number 497, Your Honor, which I would at this time move to admit. The stipulation reads in its entirety that 2 audio recordings from March 6, 2015 are recordings from telephone calls made from the prison telephone account belonging to Tony Swindle. The calls were made to telephone number 248-906-6863. These recordings were recorded at or near the time the calls were made, and are kept in the course of regularly conducted business by the Michigan Department of Corrections. That's the extent of the People's Exhibit 494, and exhibits, they relate to exhibit...
497.
497, I'm sorry, Your Honor. And they relate to exhibits 75 and 76, the two calls respectively. Is that a correct stipulation, counsel?
It is.
All right, will be received.
This time, with the court's permission, I'd like to play a portion of call
That's fine.
75.
Where you at, though? Right now, I'm at my man's crib in Highland Park. You still around that way? Bro, man, these niggas ain't... Oh, sorry, bro. Listen to this, bro, and tell me what the fuck this is. These niggas ain't talking about shit, bro. You hear me? You hear that, bro? I heard. And the police riding on Morse right now. Look, bro. Look. I swear to God, no lights or nothing. Sit your goofy ass down, nigga. You hot as fuck, nigga. Stop playing. No, I'm in a crib, nigga. I'm in a crib. I was looking out the window. Hey, man, these niggas ain't talking about shit, bro. They already know what it is. Nigga, I know what them niggas... I know when them niggas see me, them niggas be like, man, I know that little nigga got that bitch on him. The nigga,
Now, do you recognize the voice, one of the voices in there?
Yes, sir.
And whose voice do you recognize?
Kevin Smith.
And he's the one not identified as Swindle in the report, in the transcript, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you a question about some of the things that are being discussed there. Did you hear the word crib?
Yes.
And does that have significance to you as a police officer?
It means house.
It means house. Okay. And in the recording, it appeared to me that Kevin Smith was saying that he's at his friend's crib in Highland Park.
Yes, sir.
And do you know whether he has an associate that lives in Highland Park?
I do.
And who would that be?
Alan Corbin.
And Alan Corbin, do you know where Alan Corbin lives in Highland Park?
375 Puritan.
And that's in Highland Park, correct?
Yes, sir.
The second call is People's Exhibit number 76. That's what we play at this time.
move out there, nigga. You ain't going.
That's all right. I already did that one thing.
The sound is pretty, you hear?
You said what?
One thing. Sounded pretty, you hear?
You said what?
I said, that dang thing. Ain't sounded pretty.
Yeah, well, that big 9 Ruger. That big 9 Ruger.
That bitch sounded so pretty. That bitch sounded like that bitch was oiled up on the greasy tip on the...
Yeah, I had to the thing out and just play with the cock back for you and shit, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, bro, man.
What, you got that bitch on your lap, huh?
Hell yeah.
You a goofball. Nigga, sit your ass down. Alright, man, I'm gonna holler at you.
Alright, go still call me, bro.
Yeah.
Y'all call me, my nigga.
Oh, yeah.
Now, these calls were reported on March 6th of 2015, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And there seems to be discussion about the defendant having a 9 Ruger or a Ruger 9. Does that have any significance to you as a police officer?
Yeah, it means he's got a Ruger handgun and it's a 9mm.
A 9mm Ruger handgun. And that clicking sound, did you recognize that clicking sound, officer?
Yes, sir.
And can you identify that clicking sound for us as a police officer?
It's a racking of a semi-automatic handgun.
Is that the sound that a Ruger 9 would make if it were being racked?
Sure.
So if the defendant were racking down the phone for his friend in prison, that's the sound that we would hear on the audio recording.
Yes, sir.
And is it consistent with him saying, this is my 9mm Ruger handgun?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now you didn't find a 9mm Ruger handgun when you executed the search warrant at his house on Hilldale Street, is that correct?
That's correct.
It was a high point
High point.
and a .40 caliber, correct?
Yes, sir.
But on March 6th of 2015, he's talking about his 9mm Ruger.
Yes.
In addition to the search warrant being executed at the defendant's home on Hilldale, were you aware of any other search warrants being executed as it relates to the investigation of this case?
Yes.
I'm going to call your attention, if I can, sir, to an address on Outer Drive, specifically 13160 Outer Drive, apartment 119. Are you familiar with that address, sir?
Yes, that's Robert Williams's apartment.
And on or about the date of June 15, 2015, was a search warrant executed at that location?
I'm sorry, what was the date?
June 15, 2015?
Yes, sir.
You know, at this time, I would move to admit people's proposed stipulation number 523, which is 3 pages, and it reads, the parties, in this case, both agree to the facts stated below, that on June 15, 2015, officers executed a search warrant at 13160 Outer Drive, apartment 119, and took the following photographs of items found in that location. Is that a correct stipulation, Counsel?
It is. 523 will be received.
Have copies?
Copies for the jurors as well?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
Officer Burkott, you told us that you executed a search warrant at that address on Outer Drive, and it was identified as Robert Williams' home. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you had established probable cause to believe that Robert Williams was associated in this conspiracy to commit armed robberies, correct?
Yes, sir.
And a search warrant was prepared
Yes, sir.
and authorized by a court.
Yes, sir.
And was that search warrant executed?
Yes, sir.
Were you part of the execution of that search warrant?
Yes, sir, I was.
And did you go to the location?
Yes.
Can you describe that location for us, if you would?
It's a large apartment complex on West Outer Drive. It's just south of Plymouth Road in the city of Detroit.
And it's an apartment building?
Yes,
And did you have an address for Mr. Williams at that time?
I did.
Okay, and that's based on what?
His driver's license.
Okay. And when you went to the location, did the officers go with you?
Yes.
And how many officers executed the search warrant?
There was probably about 10 to 12, I think, that day.
Tell me what happened when you got there.
We went, knocked on the door. I believe Robert's mother, Pam Howard, opened the door for us.
Okay. Was Robert Williams home at the time?
No.
Okay. Was the search warrant executed?
Yes.
Were any items taken during the execution of the search warrant?
Yes.
What sort of things were taken?
Took a jacket, some ammo, like papers with his name on it, a proof of residency, and some other clothing.
Can we see page 1 of People's Exhibit 5? I'm going to zoom in on the bottom photographs. It says some clothing was taken.
Yes, sir.
The photograph on the left, do you recognize that, sir?
Yes, sir.
What is that?
It's a polo, like windbreaker type jacket.
And why was that particular coat taken?
That coat I saw on the ATM withdrawals from the Mansfield victim that was used on Livernois and Davison and East 7 Mile and DeQuinder.
So you recognize the coat as being in those surveillance videos of the ATMs being, where the victims' credit cards are being used?
Yes.
And that was, you said, the Mansfield robbery?
Yes, sir.
May I approach, Ryan?
Yes.
And you what's been marked as People's Proposed Exhibit number 346 and 347. You would just open that and check out the first item. What is that, sir?
This is the tan polo jacket.
And is that the polo jacket that was taken during the execution of the search warrant at Mr. Williams' house?
Yes, it is.
Move to admit People's Proposed 346, Your Honor.
Without objection. Will be received.
Is there another item in that bag, sir?
Yes, sir.
We're back to People's Proposed Exhibit number 347. recognize that, sir?
It's a gray Nike pullover.
And was that taken during the search warrant execution of the address on Honor Drive?
Yes, sir.
Move to omit 347, Your Honor.
Without objection. 347 will also be received.
Can we look at the second page of this exhibit now, too? Turning to page 2 of the stipulation, the first photograph, sir, on the top of the page. Can we zoom in on that? What is this?
Looks like some sort of either doctor's note or prescription for Robert Williams.
And was this confiscated during the execution of the search warrant on Outer Drive?
Yes, sir.
And it has the name of Robert Williams on the top, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, can we see the second photograph? So what is this?
It's a prescription bottle.
Is this also confiscated during the search warrant
Yes, sir.
of the house on Outer Drive?
Yes, sir.
And why is it significant that when you execute a search warrant, you find items that that have the name of the individual?
It establishes proof of residency that their items are there, that they actually live there.
That someone actually lives there?
Yes.
Okay. And the last page? Can you see that photograph there, Officer Burkott?
Yes, sir.
And what does that depict?
There's some shotgun shells and some other live ammunition. I believe that was .45 caliber ammunition.
Shotgun shells, live ammunition, you said you believe they were, what, .45 caliber ammunition?
I believe it was .45 caliber.
Now, in addition to the search warrant on Hilldale, the search warrant on Outer Drive, was there also a search warrant that was executed on an address on Brush Street, specifically 1157 Brush Street?
I think it was 11517 Brush.
Yeah, I have a hard time reading today. 11517 Brush Street?
Yes, sir.
Okay, was that executed on or about June 15th of 2015?
Yes, sir.
And why was the search warrant executed at that location?
When we arrested Robert Williams, he was in front of like 11521 Brush Street in his car, and then we established that for the last couple days that he had been staying at 11517 Brush.
And do you know whose house that was?
It was his girlfriend's mother's house.
Okay. Now at this time I would move to omit People's Proposed Exhibit number 526, which by stipulation is a 4-page document, and it reads that the parties to this case both agree on the facts stated below. On June 15th, 2015, officers executed a search warrant at 11517 Brush and took the following photographs of items found at that location, and it's signed by myself as well as John McWilliams. Is that a correct stipulation, counsel?
Acknowledged. All right, will be received. That's 526.
I'm tendering to the court copies for the court and also the jury. May we see page 1 of People's Exhibit 526? Officer Burkott, do you recognize the location there?
Yes, sir.
And is that in fact an exterior photograph of the address 11517 Brush Street in the city of Detroit?
Yes, sir.
And where is this approximately on Brush Street?
I think it's like north of 94. I don't remember the exact cross street.
Okay. In any event, you indicated that you executed a search warrant at this location because it was another address associated with whom?
Robert Williams.
And were you part of the execution of this search warrant?
Yes, sir.
Were any items confiscated during the execution of this particular search warrant?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me what was taken?
Took a TV, blue latex gloves, and some clothing.
What type of TV was taken?
I think it was a Vizio.
And why'd you take that TV?
There was a couple different robberies that a Vizio TV was stolen from.
You can see page 3 of that exhibit. Now, in this photograph, page 3, we see some what appear to be gloves. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And a mask. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Why were these items taken to the search warrant?
The gloves were described in the robberies as well.
Had victims indicated that sometimes the robbers were wearing surgical gloves?
Yes.
And did this appear to fit the description of surgical gloves being recovered during the search warrant execution of Mr. Williams' house?
Yes, sir.
And is that why they were taken?
Yes.
And you said that there were some clothes taken as well?
Yes.
What type of clothes were taken?
I believe it was jeans and a few pairs of jeans and some shirts maybe.
May I have 1 second, Your Honor? Now, after these search warrants were executed, I assume arrests were made?
Yes.
And one of the individuals that was arrested and eventually charged was an individual by the name of Robert Williams. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And does he have a nickname, if you know?
Nunu.
And at some point after he was charged, did he indicate to you that he wanted to cooperate and testify?
Yes.
And during the course of that process, it's a multi-stage process. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you describe for the jury what that stage process, what it looks like?
Well, he had to plead guilty, and then part of his plea would have been to tell us the truth about crimes that were committed amongst their gang.
And was he interviewed pursuant to that special agreement for special consideration?
Yes.
On more than one occasion?
Yes.
The first time he was interviewed, did he supply you with information? Strike that. Were you involved in the first interview?
I believe I was.
Okay. And did Mr. Williams supply you and other people that were there with information about these robberies that were ongoing?
Yes.
And you heard him testify and describe what he described as a plan to do these walk-in robberies, correct?
Yes, sir.
Was that discussed during his initial interview?
Yes.
Was the shooting of Judge Terrence Berg described during that initial interview?
Yes.
And did he provide information about that?
Yes.
And did he provide information about other robberies as well?
Yes.
I want to ask you about, specifically about some of the information that he gave you during these interviews, either the first interview or second interview. Did he tell you about things that you didn't know about?
Absolutely.
Okay. Can you tell the jury what information Mr. Williams gave to you during these interviews that the police department didn't know anything about?
Well, we knew the crimes that were committed, we just didn't know who committed them.
Okay.
So the Family Dollar robbery on January 23rd, 2015, we didn't know that they were responsible for.
Well, let me ask it this way. You were investigating a string of like home invasion walk-in robberies, correct?
Yes.
And the modus operandi, the MO, was similar to those crimes, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And there were a number of them, correct?
Yes.
And were you able to identify anyone from those robberies?
Yes.
Okay. That would involve the Hilldale robbery and the Faust robberies, correct?
Yes.
Other than Hilldale and Faust, were you able to identify anyone?
On the robberies?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Were the victims able to come forward and identify people for you, other than Hilldale and Faust?
Not really.
Okay. Were you aware of a number of armed robberies that had occurred that you were investigating that you were not able to identify based on the testimony of the victims?
I'm not sure I understand that.
Okay. Were there other robberies that you had no idea who was involved in?
Yes.
Okay. And they were similar in MO, right?
Yes.
Okay. You suspected someone might be involved doing the same ones, correct?
Yes.
But you weren't able to identify who they were, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it's important before you can charge someone to be able to identify them, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you had this string of robberies that you were investigating, you kind of suspected the same group was involved, fair enough?
Yes.
Couldn't prove it, right?
Right.
You were able to identify Hilldale and Faust,
Yes. Yes.
and that was based on identification of the victims, correct?
Yes.
Now, when you sit down with Mr. Williams during this interview, does he provide you information on those type of home invasion robberies, those walk-ins, that you previously didn't know or could prove who the identities of the perpetrators were?
Yes.
And who did you identify for you being involved in those robberies?
Kevin Smith, Timothy Russell, Don Diego Adams.
And that information was provided about those home invasion type robberies, correct?
Yes.
Now, in addition to those robberies, did he supply you with information that was outside the scope of your investigation and you didn't know about at that time?
Yes.
Tell me about some of those.
Well, that would have been the dollar store robbery, the shooting on Ward, the jewelry store robbery in Roseville.
Let's start with the dollar store robbery. Did Mr. Williams tell you about the dollar store robbery during these interviews?
Yes.
And did he admit to being involved in them?
Yes.
Did he indicate who else was involved?
Yes.
Who did he say else was involved besides himself?
Kevin Smith.
Anybody else?
Don Diego Adams.
Okay. And that took place in January of 2015, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you indicate that he told you about a Ward robbery? Tell me about that.
So he told us that they went to go rob somebody, like that Kevin Smith and himself both had firearms, and then there was another guy named Twan who approached the car, and when the car went to speed off or went to take off, he said he fired a shot.
Okay, we say he. Who are you talking about?
Robert Williams.
So Mr. Williams told you that he, the defendant, and this third person named Twan were going to do a robbery on Ward Street.
Yes.
And he told you that he approached the car and fired. He, the defendant, Mr. Williams, fired the gun.
Yes.
And did he tell you why he fired the gun?
Because they weren't cooperating.
And the victims in that case were trying to drive away.
Yes.
They didn't submit to being robbed.
Correct.
And that's why he fired.
Yes.
Did he indicate that the defendant was involved in that?
Yes.
Did he tell you what the defendant's role was in that?
Yes.
Now, prior to Mr. Williams telling you about this robbery on Ward Street, did you have any idea that these individuals might be involved in that shooting?
No.
Was it on your radar at all?
None.
When you received the information on Ward, what did you do?
So he provided certain...
Say he, who are you talking about?
Robert Williams provided certain information that I'm able to look up in the computer system, but I was able to narrow it down to a few days, and then we had one of the FBI analysts look through the shooting reports for those few days that we had narrowed down, and he was able to provide us with those, and then we pulled up the reports and was able to figure out exactly what shooting he was talking about.
So, let me see if I understand you. Did Robert Williams say to you that on this date, on May 16th, 2015, at 8824 Ward Street, we tried to rob these guys? Is that how he gave you the information?
No.
How did he convey the information to you?
He said, we did a shooting, referring to himself, Robert Williams, and Kevin Smith, and Twan, and we were trying to describe the area which the shooting happened.
And how did you describe the area where the shooting happened?
I think he said it was off of Joy Road.
Okay.
So then we tried to narrow down a time frame for when the shooting happened, and he told us it was after the false robbery.
And what's the date of the false robbery?
5/11.
So you knew it was after that date.
Yes.
And then you indicated that you looked at the computer system, correct?
Yes.
Had the help of the FBI.
Yes.
And eventually did you locate a situation that's similar to the one that you described?
Yes.
And was that the one on Ward Street?
Yes.
And how did you locate that?
Through our system, we have a crime reporting system. It's called CRISNet, and reports are made on every crime that happens where the police respond and take a report.
Okay. So there's a CRISNet number?
Yes.
And it relates to shootings that occur?
Yes. Well, all crime.
All crime. Okay. So you're able to track it that way?
Yes.
Now, did Mr. Williams tell you anything in detail about what type of weapons they had at that shooting on Ward Street?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
He said they used Kevin's .40 caliber Glock that had the laser sight on it. And he said we also used a 9mm that he didn't know him as Alan Corbin, but he said Alan's gun. We used Alan's gun.
So he tells you that 2 guns were used?
Yes.
A .40 caliber that belonged to the defendant with a laser sight.
Yes, sir.
Did he tell you to use the laser sight that night?
I don't remember.
Okay, but you remember the .40 caliber.
Yes.
And then he told you he had a 9mm.
Yes.
And did he tell you that he gave that 9mm to someone else?
Yes.
And that's the person named Alan?
Yes.
Did he know Alan's last name?
He did not.
Were you able to find Alan's last name based on your investigation?
Yes.
Okay. Later that determined to be Alan Corbin.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now once you received the information about the defendant using his .40 caliber and Mr. Williams using Alan Corbin's 9mm, or the 9mm he gave to Alan Corbin, what did you do?
Hey, I checked out the spent casings from the Ward shooting and both the handguns from Detroit police evidence, and I took them out to the Oakland County lab.
And why did you do that?
To have the comparison done.
Okay. The comparison to the casings to the two known guns now, right?
Yes.
Now, you already had the .40 caliber gun in custody from the search warrant of the defendant's home on Hilldale, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that had already been testified, right?
Yes.
Had that been tested against the casings on Ward Street already?
No.
Why not?
Because we didn't know about Ward.
You had no idea that the defendant might have been involved in that shooting
Right.
until Williams told you.
Correct.
Okay, so you take the .40 caliber to the Oakland County Crime Lab as well as those spent casings, correct?
Yes.
Had it tested, right?
Yes.
What about that 9mm that you gave to Alan? What did you do?
I also checked that out of evidence. Alan was caught with that on June 30th, 2015. So I checked that out of evidence and took that to Oakland County Lab, I don't know if it was a few weeks later.
So you were able to identify the full name of this person he gave the name Alan, correct?
Yes.
Determined it was Alan Corbin.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then you found that Alan Corbin was arrested in June.
Yes, sir.
And when he was arrested in June, he had a 9mm handgun with him, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Were you able to retrieve that gun and take it to the crime lab in Oakland County?
Yes.
And did you ask them to do anything in Oakland County with that 9mm handgun?
Yes.
What did you ask them to do?
I asked them to compare the Smith & Wesson 9mm handgun to the 9mm spent casings that were left at Ward.
That was just recently, wasn't it?
Yes.
And we heard the results yesterday. So you didn't know anything about Ward until Williams told you, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did he give you any other crimes that you did not know about?
Yes.
What other crime did he give you didn't know about?
The jewelry store robbery in Roseville.
Tell me what he told you about the jewelry store robbery.
He said, we robbed a jewelry store. I don't remember where it is. It's way out.
Way out.
Way out.
Did he give you a description of where way out was?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
I think he mentioned Gratiot.
And were you able to narrow, based on what he told you, the information he gave you, were you able to locate a jewelry store way out on Gratiot?
Yes.
And was that, which jewelry store?
So 27453 Gratiot, the Rainbow Jewelry.
Now prior to Mr. Williams telling you about this robbery, did you know anything about that robbery?
No.
What did you do when you found out or identified the Rainbow Jewelry Store? What did you do to investigate the claim that it was robbed?
We met with Roseville detectives.
You say we, who are you talking about?
Officer Dillon and myself.
So you drove to Roseville,
Yes.
met with the detectives,
Yes.
and did you receive information about a robbery that took place on May 20th?
Yes.
And what did you learn?
We were talking the case over with them, and they started to play the video.
The Roseville Police
The
Department?
Roseville detectives, yes.
They played a video for you and Detective Dillon?
Yes.
And did you watch the video?
Yes.
When you watched the video, did you recognize someone?
Yes.
Who did you recognize watching the video?
Kevin Smith.
The defendant?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see him on the video from Roseville?
Yes.
Okay. What happened then?
Recognize the other guy as well.
Who was the other guy?
Alan Corbin.
And that's Alan, the guy Williams gave the gun to after the shooting on Ward Street, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you recognized Alan Corbin and the defendant from that video, right?
Yes, sir.
What happened after that?
We took the case and sought federal charges.
So you took over the investigation?
Yes.
Did you find out anything about the items that were stolen from the jewelry store robbery?
Yes.
What did you find out?
That they were taken to the pawn shop at 8 Mile in Greenfield.
Okay. And did you go to the pawn shop at 8 Mile in Greenfield?
Yes.
And did you receive some paperwork from 8 Mile in Greenfield?
Yes, I did.
What type of paperwork did you receive, sir?
I received the transaction from the jewelry that was stolen from the Roseville jewelry store, was sold at the gold store at 8 Mile Greenfield.
And was that by Alan Corgan?
Yes.
And you had that pawn slip, the cell slip, correct?
Yes.
All right. And you didn't know anything about that jewelry store robbery until Mr. Williams told you about it?
That's correct.
Now, what about Mr. Adams? You heard Don Diego Adams testify a couple of days ago, recall?
Yes.
Okay. Was he an individual who was eventually charged with this, being involved in these conspiracy to rob?
Yes.
And did he plead guilty to that?
Yes.
And did he agree to testify?
Yes.
And as part of that process, did you have an interview with Mr. Adams?
Yes.
More than one?
Yes.
Okay. And the first interview that you had with him about the Oak Drive shooting, did he tell you the truth?
No.
Okay. What did he tell you?
He said that he wasn't there, that Denise Russell was the driver.
And he wasn't there?
And he wasn't there.
After that initial conversation, did you have a subsequent conversation with him?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
And then that's when he said, he's like, I didn't want to be part of that. I was the driver that night.
So the second interview, he tells you, look, I lied. I didn't want to put myself in the middle of shooting a judge. I lied. This is what I really did.
Yes.
So he owned up the lie that he made to you.
Yes.
Did you learn anything from Mr. Adams that you didn't know about during the investigation?
That he was part of more robberies as the driver.
Did you know, I'm jumping around now, did you know about a car that the defendant allegedly took in a carjacking case prior to Mr. Williams telling you about it?
No.
Okay. So let's talk about that. I'm sorry to jump around, but there was another case, a fourth case that Mr. Williams told you about. Is that fair?
Yes.
And is that involving a carjacking case?
Yes.
And was that, we heard Mr. Cobb testify a couple days ago about being robbed on Asbury Park. Do you recall that? You were in court.
Yes, sir.
Was that one that was on your radar at the time of your investigation?
No, sir.
How was it you learned about that robbery and carjacking on Asbury Park?
Robert Williams and Don Diego Adams told us about those.
Okay. And do you recall what Mr. Williams told you first?
I can't remember.
Okay, fair enough. Do you recall what Mr. Adams told you?
Yes.
What did Mr. Adams tell you about that?
That they had done a carjacking around the corner from where Tim lives, and that he had pawned the jewelry.
Okay. When you say they had done a carjacking, was Mr. Adams the carjacker?
No.
Did he receive information from someone else?
Yes.
And was that someone the defendant?
Yes.
And did he participate in pawning items that were stolen during the course of that carjacking?
Yes.
And what did that involve? What type of items that
It was a Rolex watch, a gold ring, a gold necklace, and some Cartier glasses.
And Mr. Adams told you this, right?
Yes.
Now, did you know about that robbery and those pawning items before Mr. Adams told you about them?
No, sir.
Based on that information, did you go to Ziebman's?
Yes, sir.
And did you investigate Ziebman's to see if you could find a pawn receipt, or a sell receipt?
Yes, sir.
And did you?
Yes.
And did it relate to a Rolex watch on May 8th of 2015?
Yes.
And did it relate to jewelry on May 8th of 2015?
Yes.
A total of $5,000 was sold by Mr. Adams on May 8th, 2015, correct?
Yes.
And that's what he told you, right?
Yes.
1 second, Your Honor. Now, as it relates to that carjacking, sir, were you able to look at police reports and backtrack and see if that car existed, or that carjacking existed?
Yes.
And again, did you go through the same process you described for the ward shooting?
Yes.
Go through the Crisnet reports, look at the areas, that sort of thing?
Yes.
Did Mr. Williams, Mr. Adams tell you exactly where that carjacking took place?
He said it was right around the corner from where Tim lives.
Okay, that's on St. Mary's Street, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, is Asbury Park a block or so over from St. Mary's Street?
Yes, sir.
Based on that description, were you able to then verify that there was a carjacking that occurred sometime in May of 2015?
Yes.
And what about the car that was taken during that carjacking? Was that ever located?
Yes.
And how long after the carjacking was that car located?
I believe it was a week.
And where was the car located?
It was right down the street from 12713 St. Mary's, where Timothy Russell and Denise Russell live.
Right around the corner from where it was carjacked.
Yes.
That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break. I have a legal matter I'm going to have to take up in connection with this case. We'll break for 20 minutes. Step into the jury room, would you please?
All right, for the jury.
Thank you.
Sure. You may be seated.
Mr. Schlott will get to you. Sure.
Oh, okay, then that's fine. That's fine.
Chevy will take care of this. Sentencing matter, and then we'll take a break.
Miss O'Rourke is
First of all, brought that Rick.
I mean, she knows your business.
Did you check with Susie Daniel?
She would know where you are.
Okay. It'll be a while.
I understand that. I'm just
Okay.
With somebody.
passing on the list. I didn't want to make it sound like she's the main.
I understand. I understand. Yeah. I want to do that right now. Let's do all the right. Well, I got stuff here for you.